Okay, so I've just got Revit open with the splash screen or the welcome screen there, so that I can choose the architectural template shortcut under projects to start a new file as normal. And while that's opening, I will go to the PDF file that I've given you, which you can get to in this folder on the P drive, so in the interior design folder on P, and then CAD 3 Harrington Street, you'll find this file 3046. It's also in Moodle in the resources panel for the subject. And I've then gone to page 13, and that's page 13 in the Acrobat page numbers. It's page number 7 if you're looking at the page numbers down there. And there you should see the ground floor plan. And we can use that as the basis for the building that we're going to draw in Revit. And so the first thing we need to do is extract this from the PDF file so that we can insert it into Revit. And that's a very easy thing to do as long as you have Acrobat Pro. And then, in fact, when you are first opening the file, it may open with Reader, depending on how your computer's set up. So if you don't see Adobe Acrobat Pro at the top, you can right-click on the file to open it again, and then go to Open With, and choose Adobe Acrobat instead of Adobe Reader. Now, if you don't have Acrobat Pro, I'll show you another method in a minute using Photoshop. No, you can't use Reader, I don't think. I don't think it'll let you export. Either Acrobat Pro or Photoshop. Okay, so if you open in Acrobat Pro, then you can go to Save as Other, and then Image, and then JPEG. And actually, I think this option will export all the pages. So I'm going to do it just for the sake of it. But let's just see. So I'm used to working with Illustrator. That's where I'll do this. But let's have a look. So yeah, because you're trying to export to the same file. I'll do it here because I've got permissions on this, and we'll say it is JPEG files. JPEG pages, we'll call it. I've got a feeling it will just export every page. There we are. So that exports every page as a JPEG, and so I've done that into the new folder I've just made. So that's one method. The other way, which is maybe a bit cleaner, is in Photoshop to open the PDF file. That's going to export all 200 pages, so you've got them there. If you just want to copy from there, that will work, because we're going to need quite a few of these pages anyway. Yeah, you can just copy from there if you like it. But it's good to know these different methods, and this one is probably the more useful one. So let's just see. So I just did it out of habit from Acrobat because that's what I had open. But now, if I go into Photoshop and go to Open, has anyone tried to do this before? Opening a PDF with Photoshop? No. Yeah, it's a really good option actually. So yeah, I'd be doing it all the time. So here, if I go and find that file, okay, you should have an idea what will happen because Photoshop doesn't work with multi-page documents. If you try to open a PDF file, which is multi-page, give it a minute, it's got to read all the pages. It's then going to ask you which page you want to open. So that's a good thing because we only want the one page. So again, it's not page 7 down the bottom, it's page 13 up the top here. So here I can just choose 13 from those thumbnails, and you get a chance to then set the resolution. So remember, Acrobat or PDF is a vector format, or can handle vector and raster. Photoshop, on the other hand, is just raster. So it has to rasterize the file, convert it into pixels. And so if you find that the drawing isn't high resolution enough, you can increase the resolution here. And so I might even have a quick peek at it in the version that just opened. And it is a little bit hard to read. Right, so looking at that text there, we probably should be able to read those numbers. So I'm going to look at the properties for that file and see that it is only 139 dpi. So here, and actually let's look at the dimensions as well. So that's 1150 by 1626 pixels, which doesn't tell us the size, but at least we've got an idea, and then 139. So that's quite low res. Here, if we look at this in pixels, so that's a lot more pixels, but still not maybe enough. So I'm going to try 600, which will give me even more pixels and more detail. Okay, so if I zoom in now, I can just read that text. It's probably not going to get a lot better than that, because the original file was probably not at that resolution. You can see here the text below that was done using a different program is much crisper than the text from the plan, which tells me that that's probably the maximum resolution of that plan. But at least we can read or make out most of that text. Alright, so then I'll, just to make your life a bit easier, I'll save a copy of that. So no, just JPEG. Yep. 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 So I'm going to call it Harrington ground floor plan.
Only one page?
Yep. Yeah. That's right. Yep. So if Photoshop only works with one page at a time.
Okay, so just go to Photoshop.
JPEG.
JPEG.
Yep. Okay, and then I'm going to crop it as well. We don't need all of that page, and that will make the file size less as well. So it's going to crop it in, so I've only got the plan where I need it. Okay, so just using the crop tool, and now I'll save that again. And you'll see it'll prompt me to save as a Photoshop file. It wants me to save Photoshop, but I don't need a Photoshop format because I'm not using layers or anything like that here. So I'm just going to keep saving it as a JPEG because we only need a JPEG in Revit. Okay, so then before I insert it, I'll have a look at the...
Sorry, quality is that how quality?
Oh yeah, just leave the quality on, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Yep, that's just the compression. Okay, so if you want to grab that file, you can always insert that into Revit if you didn't do all of those things with me in Photoshop. And you can see it's fairly small. Because it's a JPEG file, it gets compressed, and I've cropped it as well, which made it a bit smaller. So 1 meg, that's okay. If it's a 50 meg or 100 meg JPEG file that you're inserting into Revit, it's really going to slow Revit down. Okay, so it will, when you open it in, oh, did you open my file in Photoshop, or did you open the PDF? It should ask you when you open it. When it asks you for which page to choose, then you can change the resolution there. Okay, so I've then in Revit got this new file with the ground floor plan as the open view, and right away I'm going to duplicate that view by right-clicking on the ground floor view name, and then duplicate view and duplicate. I'm going to choose from the menu, and then I'll rename ground floor copy 1 to ground floor plan image. And under insert in the ribbon, I'll then choose image. Yep. And so now, yep, I'm going to find that file. So on the P drive, interior design, CAD 3, Harrington Street, and there's Harrington ground floor plan. Didn't choose any other options, so now I'm just going to click to place that, and you can see it is really big. Well, that's as good as we'll get it, unfortunately, but it's enough. Okay, so I can tell there that's 0.8, that's 1.3, that's 0.5, and that's what we need. You need to look for a measurement, a figured measurement. No, you're not in the right place. Yeah, no. Yeah, that's it. Alright, so have you thought about the orientation that you'll want your plans to be for this project? Which way do you want them to face on the sheet? So this is one of the first things. Yep. That's what I'd be thinking, yeah. So one of the first thought processes you should have working with Revit is the way you want your drawings to appear in the end. It's something you can change later on. You can rotate the whole project, but it's difficult because in Revit it physically rotates the objects when you do that. What you can change very easily is true north. So don't worry so much about the actual north direction. What we're thinking about here is project north. So in other words, the orientation of your drawings relative to your sheet. And now, I'm just looking at this and it's not cropped, so I'm going to see if it's, for some reason, it's not saved the cropping. I'm going to insert that again. So I'm going to delete it. If you missed the insertion, I'm going to, just didn't save the cropping, so I'm going to save as again. JPEG. Save. Yes. Let's just make sure that's getting saved. There we go. Okay, so let's just do that one more time. There's no point having things we don't need. There we go. Okay, I must not have saved it. Okay, so I think, is that Harrington Street, the one with the windows, with the most of the windows, and then the oh, this is Harrington Street, is it? Yeah, and then this is another street. That's Essex. So, and that's the one you want along the bottom.
No, Harrington should be on the bottom.
Oh, you want it that way? Okay.
Yeah, because north is kind of just up there on Essex.
Yeah. Up to you. Okay, so we'll look at it like that. So I'll show you. Okay. I'd do it with this one on the bottom, probably, just if you want it to be landscape. So just need to decide if you want landscape or portrait.
It's just, in fact, some documents we receive is landscape. But
Yeah.
it's bound by other buildings, so for some reason think about it, just think about it in terms of space like that.
Yeah.
But I can understand why it was that I read it as a landscape.
Yeah. So
Oh, so you read it that way?
possibly you could have it like that, but then the windows over here on the left. I usually just like to have the.
That's where the main.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll try it like that. So if you have it with that at the bottom, so I'm just using the rotate tool to rotate it around. So you can have it like that. It's a little bit Yeah, and I think actually the original orientation was probably the best. It was good to try out some different things. I think that's the best actually.
The original.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's up to you though. You just need to decide now.
Yeah, that's
And they've been a bit slack with the north arrows. Oh yeah, they do have one, sorry, there it is. And that keeps north up the page as well. So if you can have north in that direction, that's a good thing.
if you can have north facing up the
Yeah.
page. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to
Yeah, if you want landscape, I think that's the way to do it.
okay.
Otherwise, you'd have to have it portrait. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, most drawing boards are landscape, and yeah, that's the way things tend to be set up.
Also, we have to put some into A3 bound documents.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so but if you ever need to do things differently, then you can easily rotate an image to any angle. But set that up before you trace over it. And then the next thing is to scale it. So this is something you probably haven't seen in Revit before. And what you want to do before trying to scale anything in Revit is look for some figured dimensions. In other words, dimensions that are specified with numbers. And all I can see here are these dimensions on the interior that are 1.5 metres each. And oh yeah, here's another one, 1.6. That's a good one actually. And then over here we've got a few more dimensions. So we can use any of those. I'll use this one here because that's nice and clear where it starts and finishes. So I've selected the image, and now I'm going to click the Scale tool. In the Modify panel, you have the Scale button just to the left and up one from the Delete button. So the very middle of those 9 little buttons there in the Modify panel. So once you click Scale, the way it works, you probably want to watch this if you haven't done it before, you need to click a base point every time. And then you need to click the second point that you're measuring. So here, I'm going to zoom in just to make sure I'm getting right in the middle of that, that line that I'm measuring that should be 1.6 metres. Don't worry that it's going to come up as 9.9 metres, or you might get something different. But it should be around 9.9 or maybe 10, anything like that. So once you've clicked those 2 points, then make sure you take it back to the left in a straight line and type in 1600. Enter. And that should make it about, well, an eighth or so, the size it was. And I'll check that by measuring now between these 2 points. Remember, with computers you measure to the centre of the line. I know with a lot of hand drawing people have this terrible habit of measuring to one side of the line, which is really old-fashioned and doesn't make sense. When you start scaling things, that just is totally illogical. So, so centre of the line. And then to check it, measure it. So it should be 1600. Right, so do you want me to do that again?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. So I'll undo and undo my scaling, resize, there we are. So just to prove to you that I have undone, if I measure it now you can see that's 9 and a bit more, nearly 10 metres across. So it's really big. If I zoom out you can see there in my original view is really small. So again, now first select the image, then click the Scale button, then click a base point, which is on the left-hand side of that dimension, and then a second point, which is to the right. So probably just go with the measurement I'm using, which is 9.9 metres, or 9900 millimetres. Yep. You don't need to go to modify, you just need to select the image. When you select the image, that'll come up automatically. So you're on the Modify tab already, and then click the Scale button. Yours is 5,000, then it's not right to begin with. So you might have tried to scale it already. So undo back. Yeah, it shouldn't be it shouldn't be 5 metres. It should be the same size as mine. 9.9. And then after you've got that second point, when you've clicked, take it back to the left and type in 1600, and then enter.
So why don't you take your two outer sides of that?
Because they're not that's not where it's measured to. So the dimension's measured between here and here. Yeah, so from this, yeah. I'll have a look at it in a minute and double check. But you can always check after you've done it by measuring. So you should be able to do this with any image. If you use the measure tool, yeah. Oh, if you made your own, then it will be different. Yes, yeah. It's only if you're inserting the one I made that it will be the same. Yeah, so that's okay. So use that measurement and then just take it back and type in 1600, and it'll turn that into the right size. So you can see there, my measuring tool has given me a measurement of 1603, which is close enough. And then I'll check a few other measurements here. So here we've got one that should be 1.5. Close enough. 1.5 actually is about here, so I think that could be where the measurement's meant to be anyway. It's a bit unclear on that drawing. Let's look at this one that should be 800, and it's a little bit clearer. So that's, well, I'd say this is an AutoCAD drawing where you can cheat, and people do all the time. Okay, so close enough. And another thing you can check, sometimes you'll get drawings that don't have any dimensions. And so you can also try to measure things like doors and just make sure they're roughly the size a door should be. So you can see there that's about 820. The lift shaft or the lift door is about 900. So they're all about the right size. The stairs there, something else, should be about 1 metre or maybe a bit less. And there we are. Okay, so I'm going to just drag that into the centre of these views here. Okay, so you need to find your elevation views and then try to put the image roughly in the centre of those.
What do you call it, elevation?
Yeah, those. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And now pin with the image selected. You get the pin button just above the delete button, so that it's locked in position. Oh, just do it by eye. It doesn't need to be exactly centred, as long as it's roughly. Pin. There is a shortcut, PN. Okay, and so now you can put in your favourite things, reference planes, and some grids as well to set out the important measurements. Because of this sort of building it is, we can actually use grids instead of reference planes for once, for most of it. But you'll still need to use some reference planes as well for things like the lift shaft. Yeah, well, it often depends on down to the scale of the building. So grids tend to be used mainly for larger buildings, but also when you have a column grid, like we do here. So we've got a column grid, but you can see here the person doing this drawing has also used a grid for the external walls, which is standard, that people do that usually. Oh yeah, they were. There was no real grid pattern there. Yeah, it was just a higgledy-piggledy. So I'll go right ahead and put some grids in, and I'll do a few reference planes as well. But I'll start with the grids. And you'll see why it's really important to do this sooner rather than later once I've done a few.
And we're still doing some ground floor.
Yep, yep. So my first grid bubble is at an angle. I'm going to do it right over the, you can see the grids they've already drawn, so I'm just going to follow that. Okay, so I'm just tracing exactly what is shown in that image, and so I think the second grid line is meant to be at an angle, a slight angle. When you get up to that one, you'll see it's close to being straight, but it's not quite. So it'll try to snap and be horizontal. When you press the tab key, it should release it so that you can do it at another angle. Yep. Yep. Oh, so on the architecture tab, it's right at the end on the very right. Oh, you just click, so once you click on the grid button, then just click points to draw them. So they're just like reference planes, you just draw 2 points. So here clicking a corner point there for my first point of the grid, and then again this one. Okay, this is where you need to use a bit of judgment. It probably in reality is at a slight angle, but it's a lot easier to draw if it's straight. Now we could even rotate the image slightly to make that perfectly straight, but I think it's easier just to trace it straight and leave the image as it is, because you've got to have other images to line up. So this is where you've got to make a decision, and this is why I'm putting references in now, so that you trace the references rather than tracing the image. Exactly. Yes, I'm drawing that straight across, and you'll see that it doesn't quite follow the image. The image there is no. I mean, let's measure what that distance is. It's 80 mil. So this much. And for an interior design project, you can get away with that sort of error. I'd say the drawings are probably out by more than that anyway. So I would just make it straight. And what you want to establish when you're setting up a project like this is some sort of right angle. So here we're going to say the base is horizontal, and then the edge on the right is vertical. And I'll get to that in a minute. So I'll start with D, because Revit orders the grids. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Now, E is a little bit hard to see, and I think some of those others are. You can just trace the columns if you can't see the. Yeah. And I don't know why they didn't do one for the columns there. They've got 1 and 2. I think this is. So you might end up changing that. You might, I think, adding in an extra grid line going across might be a good idea, but we'll come back to that. So I'll just put in something here for E to see. So, yeah, change that to a D.
Okay.
Yep.
So that is from the middle column.
Yep. You can always adjust these later, so this is just a rough setup that you can then fine tune. So yeah, from E onwards they should be vertical. Oh yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah. Which line? Oh no, that's something else. Yeah, that's not the grid line. So the grid line you can see up here, that's where the bubble is. So there's something else there. Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Oh yes, yeah, through the centre, yeah. And okay, so the critical thing here is that you have simple angles where you can, and so there I've managed to get all of those except for the first, except for D, E to H are all vertical. So we've got a right angle at least there between H and 3. Now, this is where you may want to vary it a little bit, rather than doing it strictly the way that it has been already. So, you might decide to have a grid line for the columns going the other way. I think it's worth it. I don't see what the point of that grid line is. It doesn't really mark anything except the centre of the building. And you can do that with a reference plane. So I will do that. I'm going to draw a reference plane over that grid line. Yep, number 2. I'll delete number 2. That reference plane could still be handy as an axis line to work things out later, but instead I'll draw grid lines over the centre of those columns. Yeah, yeah. And just to give you a little tip there, Revit does try to trace these images. And so there, I'm going to start by zooming in on the column to try and pick up the centre. I'm actually looking for the centre between these two dashed lines. And then if I zoom out to place my my grid line over on the right, believe it or not, the program will look, well in this case it's going parallel to the grid line below, but it'll also look at the image and try and pick up things that it can project from, so make it easier sometimes. Okay, so that's the setup I'm going to use. It's up to you which way you do it, but then also I can easily go now to rename these grid bubbles 2 and 3, but if I try to name this one number 3, it'll give me an error because I already have a number 3, so I've got to change number 3 to number 4, and then number, or letter I can become number 3, and I can just tidy up the ends of those grid lines and extend any I need to. Yeah, sure. Yes. Oh, except for the external ones.
The other ones you've gone slightly off what's shown on the drawing and you've
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, there's no. They didn't even show the lines really. They just, you can just see the bubbles.
Yeah.
But I know there are other dashed lines, but they're not. Yeah. And then it'll make things easier with Revit if they're vertical. So don't do them at a slight angle if you don't have to. If you can keep it at 90 degrees. And the same, like I said, with number 4, if you can keep that horizontal, that makes it much better with Revit, just because of the way Revit works. So things that are at a slight angle, if something's 0.38 of a degree off an even degree, it will create all sorts of problems. It'll give you errors constantly.
Pick a number, is it 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yeah.
5, 6, 7.
No, then D, E, F, G, H. Yeah. Yeah. You should always do that. Numbers one direction, letters the other direction. Okay, so then just to finish off, I'll leave this up there, but I'm going to go and open up the original ground floor plan where I can only see the grids and the reference plane and not the image. And as we build up the walls and other things, they'll be there as well. Okay, so that should be a good basis for the rest of the project.